everyone, welcome back to Let's Talk. My name is John, and today we're going to be wrapping up our reviews of the Indiana Jones films with Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. But before we dive into that, if you are a fan of 4K Blu-ray reviews, movie reviews, lists, and podcasts, we do them all here on the channel, and nothing helps this channel out more than by you simply liking this video and subscribing to the channel. So Kingdom of the Crystal Skull was released in 2008. It is again directed by Steven Spielberg. It brings back Harrison Ford in the title role of Indiana Jones. We get returning characters like Karen Allen's Marion Ravenwood, who we hadn't seen since Raiders of the Lost Ark. We get Shia LaBeouf in this movie, Ray Winstone, Cate Blanchett, so plenty of new actors. And this just tells another Indiana Jones tale. This time taking place in 1957, and this time he's not facing the Nazis. This is more of a Cold War film, so he's facing the Soviets. And this time he's trying to get this crystal skull before the Soviets get it. The Soviets are trying to gather up all these artifacts, basically to help them get ahead in the Cold War race. This movie at the time of release was actually pretty well received. It still has a 77% on Rotten Tomatoes, but the fan score is much lower, and that's because this movie is considered by many Indiana Jones fans to be the worst, and I fall into that camp as well. I actually hadn't seen this movie since 2008 when I saw it in theaters, and I remember walking out of that theater pretty damn aggravated. So this was the first time I fully revisited the film since 2008, and as we're about halfway through the movie, I was like, why didn't I like this movie? I mean, it had some stupid parts in the early part of the films, like, obviously the most famous being Indiana Jones could somehow survive a nuclear bomb by just getting into a refrigerator, and George Lucas actually said that he did some research, and apparently there was a real-life 50-50 shot if you got in a refrigerator of surviving a nuclear bomb. Indiana comes out of this completely unscathed. They do bring it up a couple times, so I guess they knew it was a little bit silly, but that was probably the silliest part of the first half of the movie. We start to get set designs that look very similar to Raiders of the Lost Ark. This movie, I clearly was trying to recapture the Raiders' energy. They use the same font in the opening titles, bringing back Karen Allen. But then once we get to the second half of the movie, we're introduced to Harrison Ford's, which we would later find out in about halfway through the movie, his son, played by Shia LaBeouf. And Shia LaBeouf, for the most part in this movie, he's not too bad. He does a serviceable job. He wasn't as annoying as he is in the Transformers movies, in my opinion. This is actually one of his better performances. It's a little bit more pulled back, a little bit more reserved. I don't know if he was trying to do a Harrison Ford impression or anything. Some of the eye movements that he was going for and the facial expressions kind of made it seem like he was, which is pretty cool. I didn't think he was the worst thing about this movie. The worst thing about this movie is once we get into the second half of the movie and we kind of find out what we're actually dealing with, the movie becomes just a CGI mess. And that's what really drives me nuts about this movie. It also becomes ridiculously over the top and silly. We get the monkeys right out of the movie Jumanji in this. Just an alien spaceship comes out of the freaking ground and it just looks 110% fake. That's the stuff that really drove me nuts about this movie. And we don't get to that until the second half. Before that, we're using practical effects, real live sets that look like Raiders of the Lost Ark or Temple of Doom sets, where you could tell that they were trying to recapture that energy, but it just went way off the rails once we get to the second half of this film. Cate Blanchett does a serviceable job as well. She's kind of overacting, and she looks like she's having a pretty good time, even if she has that haircut as the mom from the movie The Santa Claus from 1994, which I think went out of style in 1994, so I don't know why she was rocking that in this, other than to be more hated, I guess. Maybe that's what they were going for. Harrison Ford turns in a pretty decent performance. It still feels like Indiana Jones, so you can't fully hate this movie. Like, people despise this movie, and I was one of those people, but I can honestly say it's not the worst movie I've ever seen. It's just not a good Indiana Jones movie. It still has its moments. It still has fun scenes in here. You still have a good time. Like, you don't walk out of it like I did in 2008, just miserable that you saw it. I walked out of it going, it should have been better. I really don't think that the problem is that it's kind of building up pretty damn well, and then once we get to that fake quicksand scene, it just goes off the rails. It just becomes just too silly, too over the top, and it just doesn't feel like the original trilogy of Indiana Jones movies. The original Indiana Jones movies felt like they were living in the real world, just slightly over-exaggerated. We had those silly sound effects every time Indiana Jones took a punch or threw a punch, but, and then we got into scenarios that were very unrealistic, but could still possibly happen. In this movie, These are situations that could never happen. These characters would never survive. The CGI just becomes a mess. You could just tell that these actors are acting against nothing. I mean, this is 2008. So this is kind of like when CGI for me and the way films looked was just very ugly. Like, I thought the original trilogy movies, as far as the cinematography goes, was very beautiful. I thought it worked very well for what they were going for that 1950s homage. But Kingdom of the Crystal Skull kind of feels like a 2008 movie trying to pay homage to 1950s movies. So it's got that blend of realistic sets with just terrible CGI, and then the cinematography itself becomes like very blown out, like just like the white lights are just too overexposed. It's kind of just draining out the actual colors, and then the colors themselves, they have the saturation too high in scenes, or the contrast is just too high, and it just becomes very ugly looking. I think it's a very ugly looking movie overall. There are times where it does look good, like in the first part of the movie when they're in New Mexico. That stuff looks pretty decent. Overall, it's just a very ugly looking Indiana Jones movie, and that's disappointing. But it's not the worst. I think you could still get something out of it. I don't think it's something you have to skip every time you watch the Indiana Jones franchise. You know, maybe every 5 or 6 years, but definitely not something you watch every time you watch the original trilogy. I think we're all hoping that the Dial of Destiny doesn't end up like this movie, but if I had to guess, more than likely the Dial of Destiny will be something more in line with Kingdom of the Crystal Skull than it will be with the original trilogy, because Harrison Ford himself has aged a lot. You know, we're not bringing back Steven Spielberg. Not that James Mangold is a bad director, but it just feels like it's really hard to recapture that original energy from the 1980s, and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull is a shining example of that. I really wish I could have loved this movie, but I just do not understand the decisions that were made. Some of them were just too over the top and too ridiculous, and I just can't figure out, why would you do that?
Why did you do that? Why?
Like, that's the only questions I had. Like, I get what they were going for, that homage to the 1950s, you know, serials that they grew up loving, but you already did that. Like, why didn't you just keep it in line with that? Why did you have to go 2 steps too far, I think, in my opinion? If you would have pulled back a little bit and just kind of got the screenplay a little bit better, tightened up the dialogue, and, you know, pulled back on the CGI, I think you could have had a really great Indiana Jones movie, but unfortunately, I think it's just an average movie at best. Something you can definitely watch. I don't think you'll hate your life like I did the first time I saw this movie, but it's definitely not one of the better Indiana Jones movies. But anyway, let's dive into this 4K review.
You're a teacher?
Part-time.
So just like all the others, I have this 4K steelbook pack that came out a couple years ago. You can buy these all again on their own individual steelbooks that came out last year, and actually this week, starting tomorrow, you can buy them on their own, just in regular standard packaging. So we're going to come in here, we're going to pull out Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Right here you get a nice steelbook just like all the others. Again, you know, white is not considered an Indiana Jones color. I feel like they should have gone with like a deeper orange or a black or a dark maroon, but I actually do kind of like these steelbooks. I don't think they're the worst. I just don't like that exterior box. That's the only thing that really bothers me about that. And then we pop it open, and would you look at that, there's a 4K and a Blu-ray disc in here. So apparently I've been lying to you guys the whole time. This did come with special features, but they're only on that separate disc that comes in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, and that's going to have all your special features for all the movies. There's not much, but there is a making of documentary for each film. There's some behind the scenes stuff. You know, it's not the most overpacked special features, but I'm glad that there are special features. I'm not too sure how they separated that, because the other 4Ks that did get released last year and then the ones that are coming out this week all have just one 4K disc in there, no Blu-ray disc, just like the 4Ks in here. These are just single 4Ks. You only get the films on 4Ks. You do not get them on Blu-ray any which way. There are no extras on those 4K discs except for the trailers. That is it. So all the special features for all these films are actually packed in on this Kingdom of the Crystal Skull 4K steelbook. So all the way in the back of it, you're going to have that separate disc for all of your special features. Again, it's not much, but I do appreciate that there are special features. It's just hard to grade each film individually based on their special features, because it's all packed in on there and kind of just jumbled up together into like one big cosmic gumbo. And that's kind of the best we kind of get there. But I am glad that there's special features, because I was knocking all of these for not having any packed in on the 4K discs, because people are huge fans of these movies. But, you know, I'm pretty sure that those are all the special features that have been previously released. Nothing new. That's kind of Paramount's thing. And in fact, they didn't give us a pack in Blu-ray with all of these and then giving them the special features separated to each film, I would have appreciated that a little bit more. But the fact that there's at least some special features, I have to be at least a little bit happy about that. Now, visuals, just like all the others, we get Dolby Vision and HDR10. We get an awesome Dolby Atmos track. I don't think that this was the best looking 4K in the pack, but I think that's really contributed to the cinematography, which I said I don't think is that good looking. I think it's actually overall a pretty ugly looking Indiana Jones film compared to the other three, so this is the worst 4K by default. But that's not to say that there's anything wrong with the quality of the disc. The HDR10 and the Dolby Vision do a fantastic job bringing this to the modern day. Yeah, this isn't as old as the previous three. This is only 15 years old, and this 4K itself, you know, only came out a couple years ago, so at the time it was only 13 years old. So this one was probably a lot easier to make look good, and it did look beautiful. Even if I didn't enjoy the cinematography, there are still scenes in here that you could definitely, you know, screenshot it, blow it up, put it on your wall, and people will come and people will walk by and go, wow, that looks really beautiful. And that can come right from this 4K because the Dolby Vision and the HDR10 do a fantastic job. You know, really, honestly, Paramount, when they want to, they can do just some of the best visuals around. And the same thing with the Atmos track. The Dolby Atmos track is pretty damn good. There's a moment in here where they're like kind of wrestling on like a metal grate, and the way that it's kind of spreading through all of your speakers really was impressive. They did not hold back on the Dolby Atmos track, and even if I said that the visuals were the weakest of the four on here, and that's just kind of by default with the cinematography, the audio might have actually been the best on here, and that's more than likely just because of the equipment that they were using for recording at the time, because it did feel like they were able to get the most out of all of your speakers on here. Definitely had the most bass out of all of them, so I have to imagine that they just had a better source material compared to the first three. You know, visuals, a lot of that's going to come down to source material too. But when you have a movie that was shot a certain way, and this movie definitely felt the most different compared to the original three, and that's going from the 80s to 2008, you know, they just shot films different. Even if you get Steven Spielberg back, you can't recreate the magic of the first three visually just because the amount of time that's passed. But audio-wise, I definitely did see a pretty big improvement, even though I did think that the Atmos tracks on the first three were fantastic. They were definitely showpieces. I just think that this one might have been the best out of all of them. So if I was going to rate Kingdom of the Crystal Skulls 4K on its own, separate from the pack, I would probably give it an 8 out of 10. I got to take points off for the film itself. But as far as the visual and audio quality, it really is impressive. And the fact now that there are extras packed into this one specifically, even though those extras are for the entire set, I would still give this an 8 out of 10. But if I was going to grade the set as a whole, the fact that we don't get a Blu-ray, we just get the 4Ks for each of these, and then the special features are not the greatest, but I'm glad that we have them. They're all packed in on that last disc with Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. And then the packaging. Now, the packaging is really hit or miss. It really depends on how you feel. I feel like the steelbooks are decent. They're nice. You know, I don't like that they're white. I would have preferred a different color, but they're still pretty nice. I still like how they look on my shelf, but that exterior box is really what drags down this entire set. It's cheap. It's not the best paper stock. It's got like this plastic look to it, and it bends very easily. It's got to wear and tear over time. I don't appreciate that. I wish they would have done something like they did with Rambo and the Batman 1989 to 1997 set with a steel exterior box instead of going with this cheap plastic. It does feel like Paramount cut as many corners as they possibly could on this set. So overall, I have to give this a 7.5 out of 10 because the disc quality is phenomenal with all four of these. I can't really take any points off for the actual discs. If you buy these discs individually and you want to cherry pick the movies that you like that are coming out this week, I think you'll be much happier doing that, because if you buy them in this 4K Steelbook set, I feel like there's a lot more disappointment in there than if you were to buy them separately. So I think I would recommend them buying, cherry picking, maybe get the Steelbooks that came out last year. If I was to do it again, that's what I would have preferred to do, but back then there weren't as many options. We really had to buy them in a set, so you either got the Steelbook or the regular set. I opted for the Steelbook because I'm just a huge Indiana Jones fan, and to say I was a little bit disappointed at the time would be an understatement. So anyway, guys, thank you so much for being here with me on this Indiana Jones 4K Blu-ray review trip. I hope you guys enjoyed it, but it's also Monday, so that means it's time for our digital code giveaway. On Friday's video, I asked you guys 2 questions. If you answered one of those 2 questions in the comments section, you come back to this video today so we can spin our magic wheel and see who this week's 2 lucky winners are of the digital code giveaway. And I asked you guys, what was your favorite horror movie of the last 10 years? And what movies are you most looking forward to for the rest of the summer? And we got a lot of great answers to both questions. Surprisingly, I'd have to say that Oppenheimer, The Flash, or Barbie were probably people's most anticipated movies for the rest of the summer, which, you know, spoke to me. Oppenheimer and Barbie are coming out on the same day, and I don't know if you guys saw this, just a little bit of news here, but apparently Tom Cruise is trying to get one of those movies to move off that date because if you guys know, Dead Reckoning is coming out 9 days before that, I believe on Wednesday, July 12th. So he wants to, because once July 21st rolls around, that's it. Mission Impossible is out of the IMAX theaters. Christopher Nolan and Universal locked down the IMAX theaters for 3 weeks once Oppenheimer comes out, and Mission Impossible has to move out of that, so they're trying to lock down some more premium theaters. But Barbie also comes out that week, which will also be taking up premium theater space as well. So Mission Impossible is really worried about that, and apparently Tom Cruise is taking Mission Impossible around the people, trying to show them all how good of a movie it is and trying to convince either Universal or Warner Brothers to move off of their date so that Mission Impossible can help, you know, build the box office. Tom Cruise's pitching is like it's good for everybody if one of you guys move off this date and the Mission Impossible stays in the premium theaters for a little bit longer. And I do kind of agree with Tom Cruise, but on the other hand, you know, these dates have been locked down for a while. I feel like Mission Impossible could have put their movie out in either August or in June and had a better chance, like come out like at the very end of June and had a better chance where they wouldn't have to worry about other movies. I actually spoke about this a couple weeks ago, that I felt like Mission Impossible's box office is going to take a hit because of Oppenheimer and Barbie coming out the week after. Whereas with Top Gun Maverick last year, it had much more time, it had less competition. This year, the summer is so packed, and with Barbie and Oppenheimer, you know, people aren't going to be coming back for repeat viewings of Mission Impossible. So unfortunately, I do see where Tom Cruise and Universal Pictures are coming from, but on the other hand, you know, these dates have been locked down for a while. You had plenty of time to move your date, and I kind of feel like too little too late on that one. But for us, it works out great because we get 2 weeks in a row of seeing Mission Impossible, Oppenheimer, and Barbie. So for the fans, it's great. As a business executive, I'm sure it's not so great. But anyway, guys, enough of me rambling on. Let's spin this magic wheel and see who our 2 lucky winners are. First wheel spin coming up. All right, Daniel, we're going to remove your name. Spin again. Andrew GG. Well, there you have it. Daniel and Andrew GG both have previously won the digital code giveaway, so you guys know how this works. Make sure you reach out to us on either our email, Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. DM us there. Our email address is letstalkentmt@gmail.com. That's always the easiest way to reach us. Make sure you let us know which of the digital codes you want, and as long as the other winner doesn't take it first, and you guys got to be fast with this because 2 weeks in a row, 2 people wanted the same code, and they came into me at about 1 minute apart, so puts me into a bad spot where I have to tell one of you guys that the other one took it, and I just absolutely feel terrible about that. I really do. I don't like to let you guys down, so I do get a little bit bothered by that. So you got to be quick with it. That's the rules. I only have 1 code of each unless it's Terminator Genesis. So if you want Terminator Genesis, I think I have 3 of them. So other than that, it's pretty much just 1 code. So let us know which of those you want. I will get it to you as fast as I can. And then make sure if you didn't win this week, you come back to this Friday's video. We do it all over again. So don't feel too discouraged if you didn't win today. And anyway, guys, thank you so much for being here with me on another episode of Let's Talk. I really do appreciate all of your support here for the channel. If you want to keep supporting the channel, nothing supports us more than just by simply liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and then going out and telling all your friends about us. We'll be seeing you around.